Undercover CEO buys a bike at his own dealership. Freezes when he hears two customers talking. James Walker, the 50-year-old CEO of Walker Motorcycles, had built his business from the ground up. What started as a small repair shop had grown into one of the most well-known motorcycle dealerships in the United States. But lately, things weren't right. Customer complaints were increasing, profit margins were inconsistent, and inventory numbers didn't add up. James had always prided himself on running an honest business, but something was happening behind the scenes, and he was determined to find out what. Instead of relying on reports and secondhand information, he decided to go undercover and experience his dealership firsthand. Dressed in a worn-out leather jacket, faded jeans, and a baseball cap, James transformed himself into Mark Thompson, an ordinary customer looking to buy his dream bike. He walked into his own dealership, a place that had once felt like home, but today it felt different. Employees greeted customers, and the familiar scent of polished leather and fresh rubber filled the air. But beneath the surface, something felt off. He pushed his suspicions aside and approached a sales associate with a friendly smile. Jessica, a bright and engaging salesperson, greeted him enthusiastically, her smile warm and professional. "Welcome to Walker Motorcycles. Looking for something special today?" James, staying in character, adjusted his glasses slightly before answering. "Yeah, been saving up for a long time. Wanted to check out the S1000RR. Heard it's a beast." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Oh, it absolutely is. German engineering at its finest. You get power, precision, and the handling is just chef's kiss. Top tier." She gestured toward a row of high-performance motorcycles. "We just got a new shipment in. Let me show you." James nodded, appreciating her enthusiasm. This was the kind of salesperson he wanted representing his dealership. Knowledgeable, friendly, and genuinely excited about the products. For a moment, he felt a sense of relief. Maybe things weren't as bad as he feared. But then, a low murmur from behind him made his muscles tense. Two men stood near a row of bikes, their voices hushed but urgent. "You can get any bike half price if you know the right guy," one of them murmured. James stiffened. He kept his posture relaxed, pretending to examine the S1000RR's sleek curves while tilting his ear toward the conversation. "No paperwork, no tracking," the second man responded in a hushed voice. James' heart pounded in his chest. His grip on the handlebars tightened. Half price? No paperwork? His stomach twisted. His dealership, his pride and joy, was being used for something illegal. The first man chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, but it's gotta be off the books. You sure we can trust him?" "Dude, Ray's been hooking people up for months. Never had a single issue. The owner doesn't even know. Guy's too busy counting his millions." James felt a cold weight settle inside him. Ray Martinez, his warehouse manager, a man who had been with the company for 3 years, a man he had trusted. The betrayal hit like a gut punch, but he forced himself to keep his expression neutral. Just as he was processing what he had heard, a new presence entered his space. Derek, the sales manager, approached with a knowing smirk, hands casually stuffed in his pockets. "So, Mark, you liking what you see?" James turned to him, feigning an interested but undecided expression. "Yeah, I think so. Just want to make sure I'm getting the best deal, you know?" Derek's smirk widened. He glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers before stepping closer. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Between you and me, I can get you a deal." Under the table. James forced himself to look intrigued, though every fiber of his being wanted to grab Derek by the collar and demand answers. Instead, he played along. "Oh yeah?" Derek nodded. "The owner?" He scoffed. "All he cares about is numbers. But me? I've got connections. We can make something work." James could feel the heat rising in his chest, the audacity, the disrespect. This man, who was supposed to be leading the sales team with integrity, was actively undermining everything James had built. But he swallowed his rage, keeping his voice steady. "Interesting. What kind of deal are we talking?" Derek's eyes gleamed. "Say you don't want to go through all the official paperwork. Maybe you want to keep it off the books. No financing, no tracking, straight cash deal. I know a guy who can make that happen." James acted hesitant. I don't know. Sounds kinda risky, Derek chuckled. Not at all. It's all handled cleanly. You wouldn't be the first. He patted James's shoulder like they were old friends. Tell you what, why don't you take a look around? And if you're serious, we'll talk numbers. Here. He pulled a sleek business card from his pocket and handed it over. When you're ready, call me directly. I'll set it up. James accepted the card with a nod, though his mind was racing. Derek was in on it. But was he running the operation, or just another piece of the puzzle? Needing to keep up the act, he exhaled and feigned nonchalance. All right, I'll take a look around and think it over. Derek gave a satisfied nod before walking away, leaving James alone with his thoughts. The betrayal ran deep. His business wasn't just being exploited, it was being gutted from the inside out. Employees he had trusted were stealing from him, selling bikes off the books, running a shadow operation right under his nose. James took a slow breath, suppressing the storm of anger brewing inside him. He couldn't act yet. He needed more information, more proof. He turned his attention back to the two shady customers who were still speaking in hushed voices. One of them pulled out his phone and showed something to the other. Ray's been handling this for months. No problems. You pick the bike, he marks it as damaged. Vanishes during transport. Shows up at your place, half price. Cash. James's jaw clenched. Ray Martinez, his warehouse manager, the man in charge of inventory, the very person responsible for logging damaged bikes and overseeing shipments. Everything clicked. That's how they were doing it. James inhaled slowly through his nose, steadying himself. He couldn't confront them now. If he did, they'd just cover their tracks. No, he needed to be smart. He had to catch them in the act. Slipping the business card into his pocket, he turned toward the exit, already forming a plan. Tonight, he was going to uncover the full extent of the betrayal. If stories like this matter to you, make sure to subscribe to Undercover Files. We uncover the truth behind corporate leadership and show what really happens when CEOs go undercover. Don't miss what happens next. That night, James sat in a dimly lit coffee shop, his laptop open in front of him. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he accessed the dealership's inventory system. He cross-checked missing bikes with their last recorded status. Every Tuesday and Thursday, high-end motorcycles were marked as damaged and removed from inventory. The repair facility records showed perfect paperwork, but James knew better. No mechanic wrote identical reports every time. It was all a front. The stolen bikes weren't being repaired. They were being sold illegally. His heart pounded as he dug deeper. The real shock came when he found out who was involved. Jessica, Derek, Ray, and even Michael, his head of security, a man who had worked for him for over a decade. James stared at the names on his screen, his vision blurring with anger and betrayal. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay focused. He had one shot to take them all down. He needed to see it happen with his own eyes. Pulling out the business card Derek had given him earlier, he studied the contact details. His fingers hesitated for a moment before dialing the number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Yeah? James kept his tone casual. I heard you can help me get a bike. No paperwork, straight deal. There was a pause, then the voice on the other end replied, You serious? Yeah, James said. Got the cash, just need the right deal. The man chuckled. Meet behind the service lot, 11 p.m., bring cash. James exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tightly before ending the call. It was time. At 10:45 p.m., James parked a rental car a few blocks from the dealership and made his way toward the service lot. Every step felt heavier, his heart pounding like a war drum. He moved carefully, keeping to the shadows, his eyes scanning the dimly lit lot for any signs of movement. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Tonight, everything would change. At first, the lot was eerily quiet, but that changed within minutes. Headlights flickered in the distance. A black SUV pulled in, its engine growling as it rolled to a stop. Moments later, a white van followed, its doors sliding open. James pressed himself against the side of a storage container, barely breathing as he watched. His breath caught when he saw Ray step out, followed by Jessica and Michael. His stomach twisted with a mixture of rage and disappointment. The people he had once trusted were now part of a full-blown criminal operation. Then came another vehicle. A sleek, dark sedan pulled up, and Derek stepped out, clutching a thick stack of forged documents. His confident smirk made James's blood boil. These weren't just a few dishonest employees skimming off the top. This was an organized network, stealing and selling motorcycles like a black market dealership. James barely had time to process the weight of the betrayal before he heard the words that made his blood run cold. "Let's move," Michael said with a grin. "Walker signs the new inventory system tomorrow. After that, this operation's done." James's hands curled into fists. They were planning to cover their tracks. This wasn't just about stealing bikes. It was about wiping out any evidence before he could even notice what was happening. If he had waited even a single day longer, they would have been gone. He couldn't wait any longer. A sudden roar shattered the tense air, the sound of screeching tires cutting through the night like a battle cry. Red and blue lights flooded the lot. The unmistakable blare of sirens sent shockwaves through the criminals as realization dawned. "FBI, hands in the air! Nobody move!" Chaos erupted instantly. The criminals scattered, their carefully orchestrated plan crumbling before their eyes. Buyers sprinted toward their cars, but FBI agents swarmed the lot like a tidal wave, tackling them to the ground. Jessica let out a strangled gasp as she turned to flee, but an agent grabbed her by the arm and slammed her against the hood of a nearby vehicle. Ray, in a desperate panic, pulled a gun from his waistband, but he barely had time to aim before two officers tackled him to the ground, sending the weapon skidding across the asphalt. Derek, ever the snake, threw his hands up as if in surrender. Hey, I don't know what this is about, man. I'm just a businessman." One of the agents snatched the documents from his hands and flipped through them. "Forgery, fraud, grand theft. You're going to have plenty of time to explain yourself in a courtroom." Michael, the man James had trusted for over a decade, locked eyes with him across the chaos, his face twisted in fury. "You set us up, Walker." James took a slow step forward, his voice steady, ice cold. "No, Michael. You set yourself up." Michael sneered, but it was an empty, desperate gesture. He had already lost. Two agents grabbed his arms and shoved him against the side of a patrol car, locking cuffs around his wrists. He struggled, but it was no use. The betrayal in James's heart was overshadowed only by the relief of knowing that the people who had corrupted his business were finally being taken down. An FBI agent approached James, his eyes sharp with recognition. "Mr. Walker, you just helped us bust a nationwide crime ring. This operation has been running for years. Your employees were about to disappear with millions in stolen merchandise." James exhaled slowly, his gaze sweeping over the broken criminals being loaded into police vehicles. The very people who had smiled in his face, who had shaken his hand, who had pretended to work for him, they had been stealing from him all along. His jaw tightened. He turned back to the agent, his voice low, unwavering. "And they thought I wouldn't notice." As the last of the criminals were hauled away, James stood still, watching the remnants of their scheme being dismantled piece by piece. His dealership had been used against him, twisted into something rotten behind his back. 3 months later, Walker Motorcycles was thriving. James had overhauled security, instilled ethical hiring practices, and started a redemption program for ex-convicts seeking a second chance. As he watched a happy couple take photos with their new bike, a sense of pride filled him. "Boss," one of his new employees said, "customer satisfaction is at an all-time high." James smiled. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best transformations. Walker Motorcycles had not only bounced back, but was now stronger and more transparent than ever before.